The discomfort usually starts before you even enter the room. It's not panic, not fear, not even anxiety in the way people expect. It's a tightening, a subtle pressure behind the eyes, a sensation that your attention is being pulled in too many directions before anything has actually happened. You're still outside, still deciding whether to go in, still telling yourself it's fine. But your body already knows something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. Inside crowded places, nothing is technically wrong. People are laughing, music is playing, conversations overlap like background noise. And yet something inside you begins to fragment. Your focus won't land anywhere. Your thoughts stop finishing themselves. Your sense of space feels distorted, as if the room is closer than it should be. You try to act normal. You smile. You respond. You nod at the right moments. But a strange internal countdown starts. Not to escape, not to run, just to endure. This is the part people misunderstand. They assume avoidance comes from weakness or shyness or antisocial tendencies. But what you're experiencing doesn't feel like fear of people. It feels like being flooded by something you can't turn off. You notice things others don't seem to register. The shift in tone when someone laughs too loudly. The tension in a couple standing slightly too close. The irritation hiding under politeness. The exhaustion behind forced enthusiasm. None of it is dramatic. None of it is obvious. But it's constant. And it doesn't stay outside of you. It moves through you. That's why crowded places don't just feel busy. They feel invasive. Not physically, internally. As if your inner world no longer belongs solely to you. You might leave early and tell yourself it was just too loud or too much going on. You might joke about preferring quiet places. You might blame the lighting, the noise, the lack of fresh air. But deep down, you know that's not the whole story. Because sometimes even calm gatherings feel like this, even friendly environments, even places where nothing bad has ever happened. So why does your system respond as if something is wrong? That question lingers, especially when you notice how different you feel elsewhere, alone or in familiar spaces. Your thoughts move freely again. Your breathing settles. Your awareness narrows in a way that feels grounding instead of limiting. You don't disappear, you return, which raises an uncomfortable contradiction. If crowded places are supposed to energize people, and solitude is supposed to drain them, why does your experience seem reversed? People tell you that exposure will help, that you just need to get used to it, that avoiding crowds is unhealthy. But each attempt leaves you more depleted, not less. You start declining invitations, choosing quieter routes, timing errands for off hours. Not because you dislike people, but because you can't afford the internal cost anymore. And here's where confusion deepens. Because you're not overwhelmed in the way people describe overwhelm. You're not panicking. You're not shutting down. You're observing too much. Every interaction enters your awareness with equal volume. Nothing fades into the background. There's no filter. And without that filter, even neutral environments become demanding. You begin to feel guilty about this. You tell yourself you're being dramatic, too sensitive, overreactive. You wonder why others seem unaffected, why they can move through crowds with ease, while you feel like you're carrying something invisible that gets heavier with every passing minute. At times, you push through anyway. You stay longer than you want. You suppress the urge to leave. You force yourself to be normal, and afterwards, you pay for it. Not immediately, later. When your body feels strangely hollow. When your mind replays fragments of conversations you didn't even participate in. When your sleep becomes restless for no clear reason. It's not exhaustion from activity, it's exhaustion from exposure. Still, you don't have language for that yet. So you internalize it as a flaw. You start shaping your life around avoidance without understanding why it's necessary. You choose smaller circles, quieter environments, controlled settings, and for the first time you feel functional again, which creates another contradiction. If avoiding crowds improves your clarity, if solitude restores your energy, if quiet brings focus instead of isolation, then what exactly is happening in crowded spaces that disrupts you so deeply? Most people would say it's social stimulation, too many people, too much noise. But that explanation feels incomplete because sometimes you can handle noise. Sometimes you can handle stimulation. What you can't handle is something more subtle, something relational, something unspoken. Crowded places don't just contain people, they contain emotional currents, unresolved tension, performative energy, hidden frustration, unacknowledged desire, all of it overlapping, all of it unsorted. And while others seem buffered from it, you aren't. Your awareness doesn't stay contained. It expands outward, whether you want it to or not. That's why crowds feel different from one another. Some places feel tolerable, others feel unbearable, not because of size, but because of what's moving beneath the surface. You've felt it without knowing how to explain it. That sense that a room is off, that something is simmering, that laughter feels forced, that tension is circulating quietly. You don't analyze it, you sense it, and your system responds accordingly. This is where people mislabel you. They think you're introverted, or antisocial, or fragile. But fragility isn't the right word, because fragility implies weakness under pressure. What you experience is sensitivity to complexity, and complexity is everywhere in crowds, which brings us to the turning point of this part. At some point, you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking something far more unsettling. What if my reaction isn't avoidance, but discernment? What if my system isn't malfunctioning, but detecting something others ignore? That question doesn't bring relief. It brings tension, because if your discomfort is information, then ignoring it has a cost, and honoring it means living differently. In the next part, we'll move into the moment where this sensitivity stops feeling like a limitation and starts revealing what crowded places actually demand from people like you, not emotionally, psychologically, and why stepping away may not be retreat at all, but something else entirely. At some point, the question stops circling outside of you and turns inward. Not why do crowds exhaust me, but what do crowds require from me that I never agreed to give? Because the truth is, crowded places don't just ask you to be present, they ask you to absorb. They demand a kind of silent participation that most people never notice because their awareness stays contained. Their attention remains personal. Their inner world stays separate from the room. Yours doesn't. In crowded environments, your awareness doesn't end at your skin. It keeps reaching, scanning, tracking, not deliberately, not consciously. It's automatic. Your mind isn't focused on one interaction at a time. It's registering dozens of microsignals simultaneously, shifts in posture, changes in tone, emotional undercurrents that don't have words attached to them. And here's the unsettling part. You don't just notice these signals. Your body responds to them as if they're happening to you. That's why crowded places don't feel neutral. They feel personal. Every unresolved emotion in the room becomes part of your internal environment. Every unspoken tension presses against your system. Every performative interaction adds another layer of noise you can't filter out. This is not overstimulation in the traditional sense. It's emotional saturation. And the reason it feels so disorienting is because no one ever told you that this level of sensitivity exists. You were taught that discomfort in crowds means social anxiety, or introversion, or insecurity. But none of those explanations account for one key detail. You don't fear people. You fear losing internal coherence. Because in crowds, your inner boundaries blur, not outwardly, inwardly. Your thoughts fragment because they're competing with too much incoming information. Your sense of self becomes diffuse. Your emotional state starts reflecting the room rather than originating from you. That's why relief comes so quickly when you leave. It's not relief from people. It's relief from being psychologically porous. This is where the misunderstanding deepens. People assume that avoiding crowds is avoidance of life. But for you, crowded places don't feel like life. They feel like exposure, not to danger, to overload. And over time, your system learns a pattern. Crowds equal loss of internal control. Quiet equals restoration. So you begin to choose environments that allow your awareness to settle back into itself. Smaller spaces, predictable settings, one-on-one interactions where emotional signals are clearer and contained. This isn't preference, it's adaptation. And here is the truth most people never consider. Empaths who avoid crowded places are not overwhelmed by stimulation. They are overwhelmed by responsibility they never agreed to carry. Responsibility for emotional atmospheres. Responsibility for unspoken dynamics. Responsibility for tension that doesn't belong to them. In crowded environments, your system behaves as if it's tasked with maintaining balance, as if it needs to monitor, regulate, and process what's happening around you. That's why it feels exhausting even when nothing happens. You're doing invisible work, and you've been doing it for a long time, often since childhood. Many empaths learned early that the emotional climate mattered, that rooms had moods, that silence could mean danger, that tension needed to be managed. So their awareness expanded outward as a survival strategy. Not consciously, not intentionally, but effectively. That strategy never turned off, and crowded places amplify it, because the more people present, the more emotional variables enter the field. Your system responds by trying to hold everything at once, which is impossible, so it strains. This is why staying too long feels like losing yourself. Why you feel oddly disconnected afterward. Why your body feels heavy even though you didn't do anything physical. You were carrying weight that wasn't yours. And here's the part that unsettles people when they finally see it. Avoiding crowds isn't avoidance of connection. It's refusal to be absorbed. It's the instinctive recognition that not all togetherness is healthy for people whose awareness extends beyond themselves. This doesn't mean crowds are bad, or wrong, or harmful in general. It means they are incompatible with unprotected sensitivity. And you've reached a point where your system no longer wants to pay that price. This is why forcing yourself to get used to it never works, because exposure doesn't build tolerance when the issue isn't fear. It builds depletion. Your system isn't learning that crowds are safe. It's learning that crowds cost too much, so it pushes back with fatigue, with detachment, with a quiet insistence on leaving. And the more you ignore that insistence, the louder it becomes, until one day you stop fighting it. You stop explaining yourself. You stop justifying your choices. You accept that your awareness requires containment, not expansion. And something shifts. You stop feeling broken for preferring quiet. You stop labeling yourself as antisocial. You stop seeing solitude as avoidance. Instead, you recognize it as calibration, a way of returning your attention to where it belongs, inside. This doesn't mean you'll never enter crowded places again. It means you'll enter them selectively, with intention, with limits, because now you understand something fundamental. Your sensitivity isn't a flaw to overcome. It's a system that needs the right environment to function, and crowded places demand a version of you that gives more than it receives. That realization doesn't bring peace immediately. It brings clarity. And clarity often comes with grief. Grief for the ease others seem to have. Grief for the expectation that you should be the same. Grief for all the times you blamed yourself for responding honestly to overload. But it also brings choice. You no longer have to argue with your nature. You can design a life that supports it. And here's the unresolved truth this leaves you with. If your body consistently seeks distance from emotional density, if quiet restores what crowds dissolve, if your awareness needs space to remain yours, then maybe the question isn't why you hate crowded places. Maybe the real question is this. In a world that rewards emotional numbness and constant stimulation, what does it cost to remain perceptive? Sit with that. Because once you see it, you can't unfeel it.